Hi, gentlemen. Welcome to the Mind of Christ for Men. I am Dominic from Team Heroic Men, joined by Chris Mann. Hi, Chris. Welcome back.
Hey, good to see you again.
All right, we're going to have some fun. Hopefully, this is a part two of a three-part conversation on how men can learn to think and act like Christ. And the topic for today is sacramental imagination. Okay, what does that even mean? Well, let me recap where we were, and then I'll punt it over to you. You can carry it forward. What we covered in the first episode is this idea that as a man, you are also a son of the Father. So that automatically means you're not just who or what you think you are. You are made for a lot more, possibly capable of a lot more. And then you go and you throw being a Christian into it, and all of a sudden you've got something like superpowers that we have no idea how to work with. We have no idea how actually powerful they are. So something has to change. We have to change. There is therefore a level of humility, of a sense of honesty, and also of boldness, that there are incredible things that is possible to do. And it's very difficult to get to a point where you're confident to go and take action and start doing something when you don't believe you deserve to. And so we have to look to the person of Christ to try to think like he did, not just did, but how he does. So put on the armor of Christ, put on, or the armor of truth and the helmet of the gospel and all of this good stuff. How to think like him, how to start acting the way that he did. And that can only come when you're like literally plugged in, right? There's a book called, I read this ages ago, 15 years ago? It's called The Soul of the Apostolate. And the idea is if you're going to be a frontiersman to the culture, which is my favorite word instead of saying missionary, if you're going to be a frontiersman with the culture and your family and your own community and everything around you, if you're a belt sander and you're not plugged in to any electricity, you're going to have an incredibly hard time trying to build an ark when your belt sander isn't plugged in. Now, if you plug that sucker in, how much better and faster and easier are you going to be able to do your job? So what is the plug-in? It's divine friendship with the Father, with Christ, with the Holy Spirit, with the communion of saints, with everybody out there who is rooting for you, this cloud of witnesses. So you plug into that. So that's what we talked about a bit last time, is divine friendship, reground yourself in prayer. Okay, so now comes the second part, which is, as we're saying, sacramental imagination. So that we talked about the first, maybe we could say the first part of the cross, which is like the vertical part, connection, heaven to earth, right? Now sacramental imagination is, well, what is a sacrament? And I'll ask you to define that in a second. Sacramental, maybe you could say, goes sort of crossways. So there's the 2 points, and maybe the third episode is like, you're the center part. You're where the two lines cross. You're the thing that holds it together. So sacramental imagination is what you can think and imagine and see, and how you live that out and apply that around you. So we've talked about the first episode, your inner orientation, or what you can think and imagine. Sometimes all it takes is a new idea for you to start doing something different with your life. But now that idea has to come out into what you do, how you live, and the decisions that you make. So let's talk about those two words for a second before we get into, you've got a fantastic list of Bible verses, sacred scripture. It's going to help make sense of this. Let's define sacrament and let's define imagination for men who don't usually talk about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the way that you kind of walked us through it, because it is very much vertical, right? The first thing we think about, well, I know God exists, right? He's the foundation of existence. What's the next thing that I know exists? Well, me, because I'm here experiencing things. And so then kind of the natural follow through is, okay, well, what am I experiencing? This whole world around me, right? And so what are we supposed to do with that? And sacramental imagination is kind of the most Catholic phrase that I've heard, but this is actually an idea that I see across the culture. I've heard some people call it, in a more sort of poetic and mythical way, re-enchantment. It's kind of captured even in like the gamer world, right? Like touch grass, that phrase, right? Like go encounter something real, not digital, right? It's that idea of what is the world to us? So a sacrament is defined by the church. It's an outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. And so the key here is that it is that outward sign, right? It is something that doesn't just happen in our minds. It doesn't just happen in our hearts. Obviously, God is active all throughout creation, but it's something outward. It's visible. It's tangible. And that matters. And so we'll dig into that. And then the imagination piece, I think, again, we don't want to mislead people into thinking we're talking about something that's false. When we say imagination, we simply are talking about the exercise of making conscious that which is invisible.
Mm.
And so when I encounter the world, right, there are things that I see, I hear, I touch, I smell, right? They're accessible to my senses, but there are
Hmm.
things happening in the world that are not available to my senses, that it requires my mind and more deeply my heart to engage. And those are our imaginative faculties. So when we say imagination, it's not about pretending something, it's about simply accessing things at a different level, in a different way than through the five senses.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Okay, here's what's going through my mind. You gave the definition of what a sacrament is: the exterior sign of an inward grace. My Sunday school. It's the what you can see about that is showing up about what you can't see and probably can never can see because it's happening outside of the limits of the five senses. For example, we only see like this tiny sliver of the light spectrum. Right? I think bees and cats, for example, see even more of the ultraviolet spectrum. Bugs, for them, everything is bioluminescent, right? It's not normal for us. We have to have cameras and tools to convert that into a little part of the light spectrum, but this light spectrum is massive in terms of the kind of light that's out there. So the same thing with our spiritual life and how our souls interact with our bodies. There's your body, which is like thin sliver, of the physics that make up what it means to be human person having a human experience, right? And then there's all the rest of creation that we're not able to have access to. And so there's all of that going on, and God gives us these sacraments to kind of convert all the rest of that crackling spiritual energy, grace, power, whatever, converts it into things that when we look at them and we can see them like we have water. We're gifted the medium of water. When you make that water flow in the context of a prayer, you get the magic, the wonderfulness of how baptism is. Now you can't taste it, you can't see it, and that baby looks exactly like it did 2 minutes ago when you changed its diaper. But there is a state change. Something has happened at the level of the spirit and the soul purely because you followed the requests, the recommendations, no, the commands gifted to us by those capable of asking us to do things in specific ways. I like the example, like when we go to mass, we look at it and we're like, well, there's nothing happening obviously. Like they're just hands go up, hands go down, people go in circles, we're up, we're down, okay. Well, I think that if you were to visit CERN or a Hadron Collider, whatever these things are called,
Yeah.
you would also see nothing. We're told that there are uncounted trillions of neutrinos flowing through us constantly on their way between stars faster than the speed of light or something. I'm not a physicist. And you're like, sure. You okay, bro? What are you drinking? There are constantly things happening that are completely outside of our experience, just even on a physical level of physics, that is absolutely real, and it contributes immediately to how our universe works. So it's the same thing when it comes to the spirit level of how the mass works and how the sacraments work. And so we're talking about stuff that's very, very real. To riff on the fact we were talking about superheroes in the first episode, something is introduced into, for example, we talked about Spider-Man. Something new has happened to him. There's a superhero story is a little bit of a riff on the idea of a sacramental state change, where he's now been put in touch with a completely different capacity to connect with the world. And now he's got to change how he can function and live, because now crawling up on walls and going underside things and creating webs, most people don't have access to that. Well, when you get baptized and when you get confirmed, when you get all these things, there's new doorways that get blown open inside you for a whole lot more to come in. It's more than a mere inoculation against doing evil and stuff like that. There's in the if you've never heard of grafting, which is something that the old medieval monks, for example, would do. Let me take a branch from a peach tree and let me cut a notch in an apple tree and let's put that in and bind it up with beeswax or something. And then all of a sudden you get apple tasting plums growing out of this thing, right? It's now a whole new thing because now the sap is flowing between the two. So when Christ says, I'm the vine and you're the branches, whether or not you're grafted on or not, the same sap, that same divine life is now flowing in and out. And so when we talk about sacramental imagination, what comes to my mind, and we'll get into your scriptures to start to actually break this down and make it religious and tangible for those of us trying to live a good life. How you go to act in the world depends on how you see the world. So if you imagine that, your story of the world is it's an awful place and I got to fight my way up and there's nobody going to carry my water for me and it's all on me. Well, if you think about the world that way, that it's harsh and it's difficult and it's against you and you're going to push your way up against it the whole time, if that's your imagination about the world, the world will feel like that constantly. It will present itself to you that way. You will interpret all of the cues and data and reactions and events. You will interpret them all that way. If you interpret it as like a St. Francis does, where he's like, everything is alive with the glory of God, and I'm here to bring the gospel to everything, to the bees and to the moon and to every plant, and I don't have to worry about anything. Now, that doesn't mean life's going to be easier.
Right.
It's going to be just as hard as it is for everybody else, but you're now completely able to interpret everything. Your imagination of the world that you live in, the life and the adventure that you're on, is going to be completely different because your imagination of it is completely different. So having the right story, having the right imagination of the world you live in and the life that you have is actually really, really important. In fact, it's probably essential. And that's kind of why we do things like Sunday school for kids and like, let's make sure that you're living the right story. And as parents, we love our kids and we want them to thrive and to live good lives. And that means they have to understand their story of how they relate to the world. And their first point of contact is, how do we treat them? How much love do we try to give to them? And okay, they're still narcissistic little twits and they need time out and all of that stuff and candy and all the good stuff and Christmas. Candy and Christmas. But we're forming their imagination as kids. Well, we have to ladder that up. As we look to, for example, a prayer like the Our Father, as we talked last time, if we're grounding ourselves in the sense that we are guarded and guided and graced by the wounded shepherd, by Christ, and he's the high mark. So we have to try to imagine life the way he imagined life. And so that's why I want to get into all these scriptures with you, because you're going to sort of walk us through some of that. Because what he does, this is the beauty of the sacramental imagination. I love the fact you put this together. It's not just about what nice story can I imagine about how the world works, but through how I go to work in the world, can I make it better? And I think that is a sacramental attitude, because something is coming in and you're working on it and you're accepting it or you're rejecting it and you're turning water into wine through the being of you. So bad things come at you, bad things want to get at your family, pressures want to strike you down or damage your ability to do whatever it is. Who are you going to be? How are you going to take that information or that experience or whatever, and then can you turn it into some sort of wine? For a lot of us men, this can be incredibly difficult. You will need a brotherhood. You can't hold the line alone. It's not a line. It's just one guy. It's, you hold the line with your brothers. So if we're going to learn to think like Christ, what does Christ do? He takes everything that happens at him and he's careful about how he chooses to reply or how to take action, so that when he does take action, something better happens. Something better is introduced into the world that is going to heal people, strengthen them, give honor to God, orient life in the right way, build a better life. That kind of thing is the living out of that divine life, taking action in you. The whole thing of by their fruits you shall know them, right? Is your life a demonstration or a living out of what's happening inside you? Am I on the right path? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And frankly, I think a lot of times we actually overcomplicate it. So I want to give an example of one of the weirdest things in scripture that most people, I don't even think it hits their brains because they just don't know how to categorize it. So the brain just discards it as useless information, right? And that is in the Old Testament, it's the wave offering, right? If you're one of those weirdos who's actually read Leviticus or who's read Deuteronomy, there's this thing in Jewish culture called a wave offering, where the priest,
so what is this? I've not heard
priest
of
literally takes the offering and waves it before God. That is a wave offering, right? And again, most of the time we're like, what? What does that even mean? What does that do? Like, nothing is being done there, right? But I want to back up a step and show how this actually is perfectly reflective of how we are made to interact with God and where it shows up in life, because it does. So a few foundational pieces, right? So Psalm 19, the heavens are telling the glory of God, right? The firmament proclaims his handiwork. That idea that you were saying that everything, right? Not just the 7 sacraments with the capital S, but everything is made by God. Everything has a divine component to it, right? Colossians, I'm going to quote it so I don't goof it up. In Jesus, all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, and all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together, right? So we have that sense in the St. Francises of our tradition that everything is charged with this divinity, right? And so as we engage the world, whether it's our day, whether it's the weather, whether it's our children, whatever it might be, it is imbued with this divine intent, right? God did all of this purposefully and intentionally. And I think that's the first thing to recognize. One of my favorite quotes, G.K. Chesterton, he's talking about God's creativity, and he says, I'm going to substitute, he's talking about daisies. I'm going to substitute bluebonnets. I'm down here in Texas. There's bluebonnets all over the place, right? And G.K. Chesterton basically says, not all the flowers are the same because they have to be. Perhaps God makes each one individually, and he's simply never gotten sick of making them, right? And you look at a field of thousands and thousands of bluebonnets, and like you think, what if God didn't just set some genetic machine going and then walk away, right? That's not the God we believe in. But most of the time, it's the God that we act like we believe in. What if we really believed that God made everyone individually? What does that do to our worldview? And so, what then does it mean when we interact with creation? What does it mean when we take something that God gave us and we do something with it? We go back to Eden, right? God's command to Adam was to till and to keep the garden. Throughout Scripture, those two words, till and keep, those are priestly language. Those are the same words used to describe the priest's functions.
Mhm.
So when we, as human beings, as little miniature gods, right, having dominion over the earth, when we take what God has given us and then we do something good with it, just like you were saying, what do we want to do? Well, if we're like little children, we want to run back to the Father and show him, right? You give your
Mhm.
kid a coloring book for Christmas and some crayons, and they make you this beautiful picture, and they want to come and show it to you. That's what a wave offering is. The
Okay.
Lord,
Okay.
you gave us this beautiful weather. You gave us this grain. Look, I turned it into bread. I took these gifts and I made it into something even more nourishing, even more profound. Here it is, Lord. That's what that wave offering is. It's not about function. It's not about what does God get when I wave this thing in front of his face. It's about relationship. It's about showing God, I've received your gift. I have done something good with it. And let me show you because you're my father and I love you. And I want you to see and love me.
Yeah. Yeah. This reminds me of the talents, right? The um the rich guy who goes on a journey and he leaves his three stewards with the talents, and what is it? The one gets two, no, one gets three, one gets two, one gets one. When he comes back, they come back and go, hey, look, I multiplied the three, I've now made 6 or 20 or whatever. And the second one goes, well, I multiplied it 2 times as much. And the last one was like, I buried it in the riverbed because I don't know what to do with this thing. And so I just rather not think about it. And I didn't want it to be stolen and wanted you to make sure at least you got this thing back. And he's like, you knew exactly what I wanted you to do with the benefit that I gave you for your life, and you buried it. Have you ever struggled with that? Like as a kid kind of growing up where you get your parents, you get the people at the parish going like, oh, you've got talents, sonny. You got to use that stuff. And you're like, I don't really want to. And maybe this is not the right one. And you think this is my talent, but I'm not actually really called to do this one thing. No, whatever. I think we can really struggle with that, especially when other people are defining for us what our talents are. And sometimes you might be annoyingly multi-talented, which is a big problem in some ways. You can multiply that 6 by 20 times or something. But a lot of us are good at maybe one or two things. And it's important to try to figure out what that is and then not do it for somebody else. Do it for you. How have you made sense of that, Chris? Like what's been some consolation that's helped you basically not bury it in a riverbank and actually try to do some good with who you are without feeling a pressure from somebody else to maybe do it the wrong way?
Yeah, it's a great question. And by no means is that solved in my life. That's still something I'm wrestling with. But what I'm coming to realize is just how wildly different God is than anything else. We hear the saints talk about this, and even the great theologians, right? St. Thomas Aquinas and Anselm and Augustine, they all talk about, when I call God Father, God is still more unlike what I think of when I think of Father than he is like it, right? When we say God is light, when we say God is anything, right? When we try to put God into words, he is more different than he is the same, but it's the best we can do. And so I think that applies when it comes to the gifts and the talents. I think we as humans try to take that talent and draw a clean line from the start to the end, right? What am I using this talent for? Well, I'm going to start a company, or I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to do this. God's vision is so much bigger, and God doesn't need any of it. God does not need me to be a doctor to be pleased with me. I'm his son. He loves me, right? And I think we really have to get into that paradigm. I use the example of the child and the wave offering, but I think we really need to sit with that, especially in today's culture that is so pragmatic and so production focused, right? We are extremely capitalist in all the ways, right? And to just understand that our fundamental relationship with God is not that at all. God is not better if I behave well. I don't add something to God. I don't take something away from God when I don't. It's a relationship, right? And so I think it's more like if I have a kid who loves climbing trees, in my fallen earthly nature, I might be like, well, what good is that talent, right? Learn to do a sport, something you can get a scholarship for, like I try to reduce it to practicality. Whereas I
Mhm.
think God the Father knows that we love climbing trees and he sees us climbing trees, and that is the gift. That is the talent at work, right? And I think you see this in some of the lives of the saints who just do ridiculous things. You're like, why in the world would a practical person ever do that?
Yeah.
Like, again, St. Francis is one of the best examples, but you can find it across all of them. They just do goofy stuff
Mhm.
because it's who they are. It's who God
Yeah.
made them. And that becomes the offering. And when people look at it and they say, what are you what are you doing? And they see how deeply in love you are with God, that becomes the witness. That becomes sharing the gospel. And that's the greatest good. That's the greatest work that we can do. We just sometimes try to make God's work look like human work. And in the mystery of Christ, obviously that's where we get to touch each other and exchange that. But we even talk about, when I go out, I'm trying to bring Christ to you, right? I'm trying to make my work look like God's work. I'm trying to make my work be God's work. And at its deepest, right? I'm trying to be Christ to you. That doesn't mean performance, right? It happens on a deeper level.
Mhm. So let's talk about the deeper level then for a minute. I've recently been reading a book that was talking about how to pay attention to what your talents are beyond maybe what your skills are. That kind of means the same thing to a lot of people, but what I've learned or I'm learning, I'm trying to pay attention to my own life now. It's if you pay attention to what you obsessed over when you were a kid, those are indications of the interests that maybe you wanted to do as you got older, that you maybe set aside and you decided, okay, all that is the ways of the child. I got to put on the ways of the man now. And then you threw out the baby with the bathwater. Your inner child got thrown out with the bathwater. This is beyond just, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be president of the United States. These are the things that you couldn't stop thinking about or trying to do or wanting to do. And then maybe you got time to practice doing. And then as we got older, we assume, well, because I love doing that, that must mean I practice these skills so I can set up my life in this way. Chris, you and I know we're hitting our halftime game here. I'm 38. I think you're 37 or something. We're getting real close. And then now the point comes in our lives where we start to reevaluate. My skills got me this far. Maybe they brought me a sense of grounding. Like I've got a job, I've got a family. Now I can sort of pause and think, is this actually what my talents are? Because now that I've learned to adapt to the world and to how to work and how to express myself and how to communicate and how to word good, now I can look back and think over, why was I in love with all of those things as a kid? There's something deeper going on. There's a deeper story because God didn't just I know it's like, let me create this person to go pay taxes for 80 years. He absolutely did not imagine that. It's like, that's a side effect of just, hooray, you're going to be alive in this time frame of human history. These are some of the things you have to negotiate and figure out while you're trying to figure out the genius and the goal and the adventure of your life. And like for me, I absolutely cannot accept that I have to spend the rest of my life just working and grinding and paying taxes and just like, that's a life well lived, son. I'm like, no, this is so much bigger. God is so much wilder. And invariably, it does come down to the Trinity of, as Christ spoke to, love of the Father, love of the neighbor, and love of self. And trying to navigate and figure that out. And some of us weight one side way more than the other side. We completely neglect ourselves. We absolutely hate our neighbors, or we have no idea what to do with God. And we're all about serving neighbors. And so it's like a flywheel. Each of these three have to be evenly weighted to make sense. And I don't know that it's really even possible without some special gift to kind of do this before you hit the midpoint of your life. Because for the first part, you're just trying to survive. And then for the second half of your life, now you're actually trying to live. But it does take maybe unpicking some of the stitches that are holding your wounds together, maybe to let some of the bad blood out and kind of let some of the good blood in from the precious blood, that sort of thing. So let's keep going with some of the scripture. Push back on now as I'm trying to make sense of this with you. We're walking around this.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, but I think it's, well, yeah, so let's look. This is 1 Corinthians 10:31, right? Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. What does that mean? Right? I think it's much broader, again, than what it is that we consider. Most of the time you say, okay, we'll do it for the glory of God. And we immediately think that that means we have to have either have something conscious in our minds, right? Like I have to go to work thinking, okay, I'm going to be Christ to people. So I'm going to smile at Jan, even though I don't like Jan. And I'm going to ask Robbie how his day's doing, even though I don't really care. I got enough in my own life to worry about, right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, whatever it might be. Like we get this very, very narrow focus, right? And so I think the first thing to understand is that again, whatever you do it for the glory of God. He's not telling us what to do or not to do in that passage, right? Obviously, we know there's a moral life and that's important, no doubt. But there's a lot of things that aren't super morally charged, right? When I get done with my responsibilities for the day, well, I could pick up a book, I could go to bed early, I could watch something. All of those might be good things, right? And I think part of this passage is to tell us, listen, whatever it is you do, just do it, but do it for the glory of God. And so then there's that second piece we have to wrestle with. What is that glory of God?
Exactly. What does that, how do you explain that?
Poorly. No, just kidding. We'll shoot for above
Please
poorly
go
here.
give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's reams and reams of writings on this by much wiser men than I am, but the way that it's interacted with my life, or the way that I'm coming to understand that is again, that as vast as God is, he is also so small. God is glorified when I recognize that the world is a gift, and when I bring myself to that truly. And again, going back to what you said earlier, when I try to make it a better place, right? Or when I try to do something good with it, so I truly think that it brings God glory when my 4-year-old comes up and says, Dad, I want to play bingo. I don't love bingo. It's not particularly thrilling. We don't have all the balls in the little bingo cage, but he wants to play. So when I sit down and I say, buddy, I'd love to, right? And I sit down and I play bingo with him. I am being a father to him. I am paying attention to him. I am showing him that he is beloved, right? It's as simple as that. God is glorified in the very action itself. It's not something I'm trying to layer on top of what I do. Simply by trying to be who God made me, I bring him glory.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. If you've ever read the Odyssey, the Iliad, I think it's the Iliad, there would be a little line in there that I always kind of wonder about. Or maybe I'm thinking of Japanese samurai stories. I don't remember which, but I think it's in the Iliad. They go out and they go to battle and they're just ripping through things. My gosh, is that book R-rated, but it's awesome. And then it says, like, what is it? Who's a character? Achilles, probably. And Achilles covered himself in martial glory.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, what does that actually mean? Like, does that literally mean he got like drenched in blood? Is that martial glory? Or is it more the idea or the concept of like, he's just aura farming, basically? Actually, you know what? That's probably the, the right kind of phrase. He's just standing there like, look at what I've accomplished. And everybody is just in awe of the reality of the consequences of what he's done within this battle situation. Right. So I've wondered, like, what does this word glory mean? Because you get a lot of really annoying people and pastors maybe you dislike, or sermons or whatever. They're routinely talking about this. And you probably see a lot of people who do use that phrase, and you're like, okay, you're actually talking about yourself here. It's like you're not pointing a spotlight anywhere else, but you're assuming you are the glory of God in some way. And yes, that's technically true, but like, you're full of it, bro. And I probably am too. So throw me under the bus. So I'm trying to make sense of this. Like, how does doing good magnify or add to or whatever the glory of God? Because God doesn't need anything. God doesn't need anything that I have to offer him, but he wants me to contribute something. He wants me, and he wants us as a community, as brothers or as a family, to contribute things. And so he for example, picked the Hebrew people to be the light unto the nations, to be sort of the enzyme in the human family that gets the work done to bring in the nutrition to start healing the nations. And in the same way, we're called to that same sort of thing. So it makes sense to me if we think of this in terms of light. I think that's maybe a good one, or heat. I love the concept of it's like radiation in the good sense of how heat and light radiates out. When you do good, right? When you go to make a decision for your family, with your family, in your work, in your own life, whatever you're going to do, you're going to go take a walk. Like I try to take a walk like once a day unless it's too hot. 15 minutes, get some exercise. You could do it purely from the point of view of I am just doing this to take care of my dang health. I got to keep my knees functional because whatever. Or you could be like, it is good for me as a human person to be engaging with my body, to be try to be present with my attention, to bless the land around me, to desire good to come to it. It is good to me to, like you're saying with bingo, and it is good not just to play dang bingo. Okay, I'm going to self-sacrifice. No, what would a glory of God mindset be like? And it's like, okay, I might hate the game in the minute, but there's a meta game here of like, it is better or it is good for me to affirm, let's say the child or my
Look,
child in this
even simpler
relationship.
than that. You just said taking a
Yeah.
walk. What was creation? God made stuff. People are hanging out, and it was good.
Mhm.
Glory just means being what you are, right? When we
Okay. Yeah.
glorify God, we are simply revealing who God is. Like
Mhm.
you said, martial glory or your own glory. Be what you are. You are a son of God walking on God's green earth, and it is good. It
Well, something
glorifies
happens
God.
when you do.
Glory.
There's a radiating out, even if you don't see it. Maybe sometimes other people see it. Like if I'm sure each of us know maybe this one person, let's say at our local parish or whatever, or this one guy in our friend group, or our men's group. And you're like, I'd probably never say it to his face, but like that guy's awesome. Like love being around him. There's just something there, or the decisions that he make, or the sacrifices that he make. Why do we love specific heroes like movies? These people, there's something there that is indefinable. Like you can't measure it and you can't put it in a petri dish and like multiplicate it. But there's something there that impacts you and kind of makes you want to go, I want to be like that. Whatever that is, I want more of that in me. Now, if that's a good thing, now we can want this sort of for bad things. But we're talking about people who are sitting down for a second, taking a deep breath and trying to decide what's the best thing I could do with my life. Or at least what's a very good thing that I could do because I'm not feeling like I'm able to do the best thing today. But what's a good thing that I could do with my life? And we look at examples, we look at the stories that we want to take in and try to live those out. The best stories, the good stories that help you to live a good life, to want to live life, to build up others, to create safety for others, to heal others and strengthen them. All of those are the kinds of things Christ went around doing during his whole life. All of the people we thoroughly admire, the heroes in the movies that we watch, are people who do that, even sometimes at great personal sacrifice. But there's like, gosh, what's the military division? I can't remember, but they're like, we do what we do that others may live, right? Your life, or just to be alive, is such a good that I'm prepared to make sacrifices to my own freedom, my own safety, my own whatever, that others may live. And so that contributing, right? We're trying to make the world a better place. There's something of God that is radiating out of you, and you might be totally blind to it. And it's kind of like not our job to try to find that or see it. Glory of God is not something you ever actually look for to see in your own life. You just hope to God that you're doing good and something good is going to come from it. But we can often see it in other people's lives. And it's kind of a bit cringe maybe to walk up and try to tell them. And then if they're like, oh, well, thank you. And it's like, okay, fine, you missed it. The best people are like, well, they'll probably immediately go, well, praise God. I'm glad it's gone well. I don't totally see it, but if God is more alive or more real, or if the world is a better place, or if this parish community is doing better, or if men are having better outcomes with their lives because of decisions that we're trying to make, it's an extremely Christian thing to do, to start from a foundation, to start from a story that when we go to work in the world, Christ's got the shotgun, or he's riding shotgun. And, there's the line where it's like, Christ take the wheel. There's something to that, obviously. I don't know what I think about that because there can be a way where you be passive then. And you're not actually leaning in and biting in to do something with the good, creative energy and decisions that you can make with your own life. God doesn't want you to phone it in. Because otherwise, what's the point of giving you interest and talent and energy and all of this? We're supposed to do stuff. And are we going to fail and fall? Probably. So I think I found my cheat code. And it's that I have no idea how to do the right thing. Well, I mean, maybe I sort of do, but I don't actually know if it's going to be a good thing to do because I'm absolutely in love with myself and my own decisions and I'm self-obsessed and whatever. like most humans. So I'm going to take a trust on God, which is, I love the prayer. And I've said this multiple times. I'll say it probably forever. Jesus, I trust in you. Take care of everything.
Yeah.
And so I'll take my walks and I'll run that 10 times. Let me do it another 10. Let me do it another 10. I want to try to get it into my bones that when I go to act, I'm trusting and Jesus take care of everything. And that even means he's going to be like the prayer of St. Patrick, Christ above me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ in the eyes of all those who see me, Christ in the mouths of those who speak to me, Christ in like everything. I'm like in a fog of just Christ. I'm trying to operate inside him. He's in my bones. That would be the ideal sort of situation. It's like, and then Christ goes and says, well, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Your ability to take life and act and green and grow and create fruit and be strong and hold up this tree only happens because I'm feeding you. So if we can have confidence in that, then you're like, I was talking with my spiritual guide and he's like, the good thing about that, because I was asking him, I'm afraid of being passive. I don't think that's a good thing to be passive or to be like, I think as a man, especially, it's our job to know when to act.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, the nice thing about that prayer is that you can trust that when it's time to act, Christ will prompt you. So you can take confidence in that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, that's awesome. Okay, so now I got to work on acting. And maybe that's going to come up in like the next conversation.
Well,
but you got to start with go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm gonna be the broken record here and say it comes back to childhood. I mean, because I have that same concern, right? I'm very performance driven. I'm very results oriented. I struggle more on days off than I do on days that are ridiculously busy because I get halfway through and I'm like, what am I even doing with my life? I haven't produced anything. I haven't checked any boxes, right? And it's recognized to me as not healthy, right? Like, but look at a kid who's truly at play, right? I mean, and this is sometimes hard to find these days, unfortunately. I mean, that's part of the whole challenge to society right now. But you think about kids playing, they build entire worlds out of blocks, right? Or gosh, they spend 3 hours with nothing but a trickling hose and some dirt, right? Or that experience, listen, I just bought you the most expensive, beautiful thing for Christmas, and all you want to do is play with the box. But as they play, how much industry, how much effort and energy are they spilling out, right? How much trial and error do they get, right? How many times do they fail and try something again? Like rebuild the same tower over and over again and knock it out, right? There's that sense of childishness, but it's not passivity, right? It's about, I think, again, wrapping our heads around a different sense of worth, right? It doesn't mean that we're not providers. It doesn't mean that we don't need to produce. It doesn't mean that those aren't aspects of our lives, right? That's all a piece of it, 100%. But we can't go too far that way. Or again, we lose the sacramental imagination. We lose Christ's life. If Christ came and said, all right, guys, listen, at the end of the day, I just got to die on this cross. That's the deliverable here. His life would have looked a whole lot different, right? Like I can't imagine that Christ walked into a town and said, all right, on my list, okay, Jimmy's got leprosy, Frankie has this, Sarah's, a widow. It just doesn't fit, right? That's not Christ, right? And so that's where I think it's about letting go, not of the effort, not of our activity, but letting go of our direction to that activity, right? We're saying, God, I surrender that choice to you. Where do you want me to work? How do you want me to work? And to have the humility to accept when God says, listen, I want you to pay attention to your kids who have nothing that interests you, right? Whether that's a teenager whose interests are different, whether it's because they're 2 years old and we're wired for entertainment these days, right? Everything that we want is at our fingertips until we actually encounter another human being who has different needs and wants and desires than we do. And we have to put ourselves on pause and actually listen. If God says, that's where I want your activity directed, no, there's no reward at the end. You're not getting a trophy. You're not getting a paycheck. You're not getting a pat on the back. But you're going to be who you're meant to be. Is that enough for us, right? Can we embrace that poverty of spirit, to whom God says, blessed are the poor in spirit, yours is the kingdom of heaven. Can we give up the earthly kingdom to gain the heavenly one? We have to die.
I like that.
The cross.
I think that gotta die, bro, somewhere. What is it? That line, you have to die before you die, or learn to die before you die, so that you don't die when you die.
Yeah.
I think maybe the point of this conversation that we're trying to get at is to kind of realize we ourselves are maybe a small s, maybe actually a big S, but start with small s, sacrament. to our own, to the world.
Yes.
Because there is a divine life inside us that is not ours, that was gifted to us, that we have to cultivate and then convert into the decisions and the actions and the life building and the life making and the safe making and the healing, right? The fighting back and the exorcising and all of this good stuff. All of those actions are the visible signs of the inward grace at work inside us. And that's kind of why, for example, with heroic men, it's one of the reasons why I love this job, working with heroic men and the ministries of men that we go to support who are out there doing the kind of things that sort of we're also doing. There's a point at which, like you were saying about this sort of childhood play, sense of play. This is the cool thing about being an adult, really. You actually get to, if you can get past all of the work that you have to do, there's also a state of play where we're looking at, okay, here's the problems in the world. What kind of game can we build with a team of people to take on that problem? Now, if you take it too seriously, you will burn out because what is that line from Chesterton? Satan fell from the force of gravity, but angels fly because they take themselves so lightly.
Yeah.
Right? Simon Sinek wrote this awesome book called The Infinite Game. And I remember sort of reading it and realizing, my gosh, if this guy's not a closet Catholic or Christian, like,
I know, right?
Right? Because so here's why I think Catholics and Christians and us men and what we're doing with heroic men, we're involved in playing an infinite game, which is such a cool concept. And here's what it means. There's two kinds of games that you play. There's a game, a competitive game that you play to win. There's a winner, there's a loser, there's usually a deadline, and somebody gets a trophy. That's awesome. We call them the Olympics, we call them Little League, whatever. That's one kind of game. But then there's the other kind of game that you play. And that's, Simon Sinek describes it as the game that you play when you're coming home from school and the kids find a ball in the street and they start playing a kickball game. And then some kids leave and then more kids come and then the kid with the wheelchair comes in, and then somebody else who only ever uses their head for everything comes in. And so what do you do with this game? You start to realize you're not actually playing the competitive kind of game, which is what we do in business a lot. You're trying to play a game that keeps changing and evolving the rules. Why? So that the game can continue basically forever. Because the point of the game is not to win. The point of the game is to involve as many people as possible and to adapt the game to allow as many people as possible to play. And at some point, after like 2 hours, the original people who started the game, they've gone home. And there's a whole new group of people in there. The game is continuing and they're playing it. Maybe they're doing it their way and the ball is still bouncing around and, people are still having fun. I look at what we're doing with heroic men. And of course, heroic men is to serve all of the ministries out there who are trying to now, you're playing your own infinite game at your parish. You're trying to raise up a group of men to do what? To strengthen each other, strengthen their families, strengthen that parish, to heal them, to bring them conversation, to bring light, to radiate. What is the glory of God? It's when things are going well, when we are stepping up and creating these safe havens, we're creating these dens where good things can happen, where, let's say, those who are weaker than us can breathe and rest and know that they're cared for, where good things can grow, where there are no more wild things. Okay, that's a family home. That's a good community. That's a parish. And if we don't have that, that's the first thing men go to work solving. I love that. Who's it? Alison Armstrong. She says, men love problems the way a dog gets his teeth on a squirrel. Like, we just want problems to solve, right? Give us a problem. And so if men aren't doing anything, it's because nobody's telling us what the problems are. Because men are geniuses, I think, is what we are. We like to solve problems this way. You say we hate holidays and weekends off because it's like, there's nothing wrong. I don't know what to do here. Can I please go back to where I'm desperately needed? So that sense of like, if you are the sacramental to your state in life, to your own life, so are you paying attention at all to what it is you want to contribute to the world? Are you paying attention to the story you think you are living? What are you imagining about the kind of world that you live in? Got to pay attention to that carefully, because it's out of that you're going to make all of your decisions. And then who are you doing good for? I think I was talking with you. I don't remember who else it was. It might have been you, Chris, on another conversation. I am convinced that a man cannot truly live and sacrifice purely for an idea. If you do, I think you will turn into not just an idealist or a fundamentalist, but I don't know, perhaps even a terrorist. I don't know. Because I think Chesterton made a point that if a man of a single idea is a dangerous man, it's a man who has a multiplicity of ideas is a more well-rounded man. Why am I bringing this up? Because I think that a man who is able to live and do well to take all of our skills for survival, which is what men are geniuses at. It's like we find ways to survive and to adapt and solve problems and grow and save people. It's what we want to do. It's why we've got all of the energy and godly goodness that we've got in us. I think you need a person to sacrifice for. Otherwise, it doesn't totally feel like sacrifice. Because if it's just you in the mirror that you're sacrificing for, I believe, because it's been my experience, and maybe the men listening, send us a message or comment in the comments or something. When you're just sacrificing all of the energy of your life purely for yourself, for the man in the mirror, I think you burn out because it's never enough. But it just takes one other person, not an idea, one other person. I'm not even sure it can be your idea of God. Because look at how many ideas of God we have all over the world that fracture us and divide us. Well, that's an instant indication of, okay, we're doing something wrong. We're trying to do something right. We're doing it maybe in a wrong way. I think you need another person to sacrifice for. It doesn't have to be your wife, although that's the best way that something really comes into focus, is you can't run from that face, or your child or your family, or you choose somebody or a group of people, some people that you can actually see. Could be, again, your local parish. You're trying to keep this local and practical. Your parish, your local community, people who need help, who are suffering. Who are people who are suffering that you can sacrifice or go to work for? That makes it real. That makes it not just about you. You're not given all of the strength of your bone and beard and grit and muscle and everything just so that you can flex on the side of the street. It's given to go to work, to do something. We have the brains and the brawn to do good things. I think it's the men who feel most satisfied with their lives when they look back and go, I did a good thing. At least I tried. I think there's a lot of men who regret just not doing anything.
Yeah, and the flip side of that too, I think is really important. I'm gonna read a quote from a book. This is from a psychology professor, Robert Emmons, who I'm told is the father of gratitude research. He says,
Cool.
grateful living is possible only when we realize that other people and agents do things for us that we cannot do for ourselves. Gratitude emerges from two stages of information processing: affirmation and recognition. We affirm the good and credit others with bringing it about. In gratitude, we recognize that the source of goodness is outside of ourselves. And so I think first and foremost to receive that from God, but to get again to receive that from the world, to be grateful for the world around us. And then yes, where are we bringing that? Where are we being a presence for which someone else could be grateful? It's having both, right? Like you said, we have to avoid that burnout. If I try to be my own sustenance, even if I think someone good to sacrifice for, what fills me, right? Where is my gratitude? Where am I receiving goodness that I might give goodness? Right? Because if I simply receive bitterness, all I'm going to have to give is bitterness, right? I might do good things, but with a wounded heart, right? And so I think there's that beautiful reciprocal image, right? Again, perfectly encapsulated in Christ, right? Who's both God, the fount of all energy, right? The fount of all life, and man, right? Who without God is nothing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got so two last things, and then I'll ask you to land this plane. Let's bring it home. I'm just thinking of I've got these two figurines on my desk to sort of inspire me. So one is Batman here,
Nice.
and then I just got myself a Captain America the other day. I love these two figures, and here's kind of why. They're both compelled to do a good thing and honestly sacrifice themselves and their safety and almost their life over and over and over. But I think, and I'm curious what you think. I'm thinking this through for the first time right now. Batman doesn't really, I mean, he resents a lot of what he has to do. And that literally comes out in his costume. Like he's dark, brooding, mad. He's not a happy camper. And yeah, he just wants to punch the world out because the world deserves it. It's like gross and it needs a judgment father. Well, what's interesting about, Steve Rogers, and although his journey it evolves and does whatever, there's a lot more joy inside in his heart. Like I love that first scene, like especially from the new movie. God, new movie, was it 15 years ago?
Yeah.
10 years ago. Time flies. And he's like, I could do this all day. Like, it still hurts, but I can't be anywhere else. I couldn't live with myself if I was anywhere else, not here trying to solve this problem, or at the very least, taking the punches so somebody else might live. And then he goes on to be that man for the rest of his life. And the number of people who just sort of watch that figure and love it. And they're like, what is the reason for the hope that is in you? I want what you have. And he's committed to keep taking action. And even when he loses complete faith in the structure of the government, the human family situation around him, and realizes they've all betrayed him. Very Christ figure in that moment. He still comes back with an epic beard and he goes, I'm still here to do an insane amount of good in the time that I have. Point me in the right direction. Tell me where to go. I'm here to serve, right? I can't get over that. That's the kind of man that I want to be. And I think that's the kind of man, that's what we're trying to do kind of with this whole heroic man thing. Is like, we leave no man behind. Why? Because the soul of a man as a hero is just who we are. It's not just because we feel guilt or shame. It's like, no, whatever you might think, I can't live with myself if I don't try to do good with the time that I have, and the talent that I have, because I don't want to get to the end and then just regret that I didn't at least try. And maybe I tried and I failed badly, but heck, I tried. And that's worth it. That's a good story.
Yeah.
So take us home, Chris. How would you close this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of come full circle, right? We look at the world again, we receive the gifts of God, and then what do we do with it, right? We offer it back to God. So you have this cycle, right? God creates us, we engage with the world, we take what we engage with in gratitude and openness, right? We improve it, we give ourselves to it, right? So that we can then present it back to God. And that's really, I think, again, when we talk about the mind of Christ, what does that mean? It's to see the world as an opportunity to love the Father. And again, very, very specifically, I want to say this very loudly, not in some sort of utilitarian, mechanical, functional kind of way, right? This is not one of the myths, right? Where the gods need the worship of their worshipers to survive, right? Like, we're not a factory, we're children, right? And so as we think about that economy, again, God creating us, God giving us the world, us taking the world and offering it back to God, that's what Christ did, right? But Christ was not used in that sense, right? I mean, he even talks about this. He speaks against this with his apostles, right? I don't call you slaves. I call you friends. Why? Because you know what I'm doing, right? What he's meaning there is because you can willingly participate in this great, incredible thing that's happening, right? You're not forced into it, but you're true participants, right? And so we see the world as that sacrament. We see what's around us. And yes, again, sometimes it is the hard facts of work and what we need to do to make ends meet, yeah, changing a diaper for the umpteenth time today or whatever it might be. But each of these is an opportunity to take what God is giving me in this life and in my existence, to say thank you, to recognize the goodness of it, even the hard stuff, and to offer back what we can.
Mhm.
Even if it is simply that moment of recognition or simply that moment of being. Again, I'll go back to that image of you just taking a walk. Adam walked in the garden and it was good, right? I think I would just finally say, don't make it harder than it has to be. Be
Right.
grateful for what God has given you and do your best to give it back. The
Yeah.
end. That's the Christian
At the
life
end.
right there.
Yeah. Don't multiply the pressure on you to be more, do more. Sometimes you do need to actually get rid of. This is why the image of like unpick your stitching. There's a lot of wounds that we carry through life from people or from decisions that we have made. And sometimes you need to slow down and find a quiet place, kind of where you can be left alone for a minute with your wounds to decide. It's like when you get like a bullet through your hand kind of thing and your hand sort of heals, and it can become extremely strong, but you're like, maybe we need to like thaw this out a little bit, and sometimes we have wrong stories, wrong ideas, wrong practices and habits, and it just takes a moment of silence. I think a good practical little thing for me, because stuff's got to be real simple if it's going to stick. I love the sign of the cross as a reminder of everything that we just talked about here, where you have the vertical, which is heaven to earth, right? Everything from the highest, greatest of everything down to the lowest of everything, and then friend to friend, right? And every time you make the sign of the cross, you're anchoring yourself in a vision of reality where where the two lines cross, matter. You're the overlap of where heaven and earth and friend to friend come to matter. And it's almost like if you're kind of like you wake up one day and suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm a son of the Father. I have divine life coursing through my veins, but I can't phone it in. I've got to actually get to work so that this life continues to stay in me and then radiates out for me to help other people, right? And then the moment that you realize that, you look to the right and you look to the left and you go, there's two other people here. They're also exactly like me. Just reach out. Okay, let's grab hands so that we can form a line, shield wall against the incredible difficulties. What does Jordan Peterson say? The horrible catastrophe of your life. Strong hold arms together because that's your friend to friend. That's what your shoulders are for. It's to be able to extend your arms and to connect things to you, right? So you build your shield wall. That vision that you are a good thing to be in the world. That's a good story. And the sign of the cross, it's not just like I'm blessing myself to ward off evil. That's a thing. But why might that even work? Well, it's because you're realigning yourself in a right orientation with the highest, greatest, most possible, beautiful good you can imagine, all the way down through the whole of your being, down to the smallest part of you. And then you're recognizing it's not just a vertical thing. I'm not going around signing myself with a vertical stripe. It's like, nope, there's also the cross. There's the horizontal. There's this friend to friend, because it's not this tree to this tree. We're here with to love God with all your strength and your neighbor as yourself, like all three of those. And you get that with the sign of the cross. It's just, I don't know, they deconstruct a triangle, whatever. So that's been the first 2 episodes, friends. I hope that it's been helpful. If it has, drop a comment and let us know. And we're going to come back in our 3rd episode and have some more fun with that one.